they struggle to articulate what are the top 3 problems that we eliminate. They know how to pitch, offer you into a demo right away. They can't say, so what's bugging you today, and what are the big objectives for the business stuff, the next 3 years, where do you guys want to go? They don't know how to have these conversations.
I'm Ed Marsh, host of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. I think I can pretty confidently say that sales is less fun than it was a decade ago. Great salespeople still mint money for themselves and their companies. It's still a great career path for second and third standard deviation talent who are open to coaching and training, but it's hard. And the reality is there's many days that aren't fun. And that's on our side as salespeople. Imagine being on the prospect side, getting deluged with just 12-step sales cadence after another that, shifts scripts every couple of years like tides, from the predictable revenue model to the challenger sales model to the please pick a number model to the virtual lunch invite model. And then, the LinkedIn Connect Insta pitch. Enough already with this stuff. So clearly we need to do something differently. And heaven knows that we need to inject a bit of fun or at least some humor back into the depressing existence that we're creating for ourselves and for prospects. And that's why I'm so excited to have Jon Selig join me today. He's a stand-up comic, so I feel like I ought to be telling you to put your hands together for him. But instead, like our prospecting, first I'll give a stiff corporate speak intro and then turn it over to him to tell you more about himself. Jon's a graduate of McGill and McMaster Universities. He's got degrees in marketing and business. He kind of eased his way into the business world in the late 90s with a variety of marketing and consulting jobs, and then eventually ended up spending 12 years in enterprise sales, selling Oracle ERP. So he definitely empathizes. He's not talking about sales in the abstract. But then he realized he'd had enough, or couldn't maybe jump out of it immediately, but he decided to begin pursuing his dream as a stand-up comic. He was doing sales and comedy in parallel and claims to have realized there's a lot of overlap. I'm interested to hear more about that today. Along the way, he took a detour running a comedy travel business, and today he works with sales and marketing teams on trying to help them understand why it's important and how to execute injecting humor into their messaging. So I'm really excited to chat with Jon. I'm a bit nervous. I worry I may be like the guy, the moron that sits in the front row at the show and ends up wishing he'd stayed home after he's the butt of the jokes all along. But hopefully Jon will take it easy on me. So anyway, I'm thrilled to welcome Jon Selig as he talks today and makes you cringe or chuckle. Either way, just think about colleagues who should hear his message, hear what he has to say. Please share the episode with them. Give us a like, even give us a 5-star review. So with that, welcome, Jon. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I just want to clarify one thing. That was a great intro. You even corrected course when you said he's a stand-up comedian. No, but you kind of got to the real meat, which is, I sold technology for a really long time. But my dream was not to become a comedian. I did not get into comedy to become a full-time comedian. My only dream in getting in that I wanted to fulfill by getting into comedy was never having to sell software again. And I'm living that dream right now. So it's really good to be here, Ed.
Yeah, except vicariously you're helping others sell software, so I'm not sure you've completely escaped it. But there's no doubt that introduction was still kind of more corporate speak than it ought to be. So take us through your career progression, a little bit more detail. You just offered a clarification, but give us some more context so that for the rest of the conversation, I think it's going to be much more meaningful if everyone understands really what you've done.
Yeah, I ended up in sales because I wasn't good at anything else. And I had done a lot of kind of organizing and even cold calling and door-to-door sales in my younger years. And I had an MBA at that point, and I didn't really fit into any box. I wasn't some pure marketer, and I wanted to be in marketing back in those days as probably I didn't even know the role copywriter existed. I thought you had to. I was the kind of guy who was good at strategizing and coming up with broader ideas that some artistic people can implement. And I was even part of an inter-university advertising competition team. And we won the competition, and it was all based on, I came up with this slogan, Bell Canada, the big phone people. It was all about marketing Bell to small business. And I came up with this slogan, Bell works at home for you. And for whatever reason, our team went with it and we won the competition. And we were promised, I guess you can call them internships at a local advertising agency. And that turned out to be a bit of a sham. They interviewed like one person of the five of us. I won't get into those reasons. But, and then I was applying for advertising jobs and they said, "Do you have a portfolio?" I'm like, what portfolio? What do you mean? And I'm like, well, can you show us your scrapbook of your graphic designs? I'm like, no, I'm not a graphic designer. I don't do that stuff. Well, you can be an account manager and kind of organize stuff. I'm like, no, I want to be the person who brainstorms creative ideas that will work well in advertising. And at that age, that role didn't seem to exist given my skills and my background. So I ended up bouncing around. Like I did my MBA at a really young age, and then worked in the .com bubble / bust. And then I didn't know what the hell like I was doing with my life. And lo and behold, one day I saw an ad for job ad for business development consultants needed at this tiny startup called Oracle. And I said, oh man, I have an MBA. I have a Bachelor of Commerce. I can take this business to the next level with my development consulting skills. And I applied and I showed up and, they said you needed an MBA to apply. I showed up hoping to, meet the person who's going to be my boss like the next day. And that did happen. Actually, that did happen. But there was also like 30 other people there for a group interview. Like they were like, it was a cattle call, I guess you can say, rotating us around. We had to interview with other people, with various people. And the bottom line was we also had to make a presentation. We had to prepare a presentation on some business that we were familiar with. And I chose a friend's business. And I didn't get called to interview at first, but they said, you're going to go present to this random guy. And I got up there and I delivered the presentation of a friend's business. And I said, do you have any questions? He says, I don't really know what you just said, but you're going to fit in fine around here. And he was my boss. He became my boss. I got a call the next day. They made it sound like it was going to be like a long process. I did go through some interviews at that point. It felt like a formality. Immediately after I spoke with my boss, like he was keen. He was like, I want this guy. And the job, turned out to be cold calling. And they kind of told us that in the brief intro spiel. I actually almost walked out. They used the term telemarketing. And I was like, I'm not going to be a telemarketer. But something said stay. And it sounded like, look, it was an environment in the early 2000s where there was some challenges, kind of like we're having now, at least in tech. And I felt, you know what? Things are rocky out there. To go work for some startup is dicey. You're going to be out of work within 3 to 6 months, no matter what. Just stay here. It's stable. It's a big company. They seem to have a plan. It's a clear job. Pick up the phone, make 40 dials, book meetings for field sales executives who are looking for net new ERP deals. And they're going to train me all the time. And I said, you know what? Maybe it's a little demoralizing to the ego that I'm making cold calls at this stage of life. But what stage of life was that? I was in my mid-20s. So I was totally, on one hand, my ego was bruised. On another, it was a great opportunity. And I took that. And I ended up in sales after about a year of cold calling for Oracle. And then I moved over to an Oracle partner for another 6.5 years. And then I had a mid-career crisis, which I balanced along with some other sales gigs over the next couple of years.
Got it. And then you had this itch for comedy, and let's kind of set the stage in terms of your stand-up career or activities or whatever we want to call it. Obviously, that's not your primary job, but certainly you've got plenty of clips of yourself standing on stage in front of audiences in comedy clubs. So let's talk about content creation, because that's a topic that runs through many of my conversations. And industrial companies often just cringe when they hear content. First of all, what does that mean? And how do they do it? And nobody's got time, and they don't want to reveal their secrets and everything else. So let's not worry about any of that for right now. But let's talk about how you create a show. Does inspiration strike, or do you sit still for 12 hours and just sweat it out? What do you know? I mean, what percent falls flat when you try it? And how long do you have to rehearse? How many reps in order to get it to deliver correctly. Give us all the nitty gritty. I mean, it sounds like a sexy profession, but I'm sure there's a lot more work than we realize.
Yeah, so it's really funny. So my business name is Comedy Writing for Revenue Teams, and people go, "Oh man, I love improv," and I'm like, "You didn't read one of the four words in there, which is writing." And the whole idea is that stand-up comedians, we're not making it up as we go along. We get up there. Our goal is to make it look like we're talking off the top of our heads, but it's all scripted and it's crafted and it's been honed and refined. And there's been a lot of failure en route to that Netflix special that you're watching, where people in the audience are laughing every 15 seconds. There's a lot of uncomfortable silence to get there. So to put together, like when you start out in comedy, they tell you, you like doing it, whether it's going well or whether it's not going well. Nobody likes it when it's not going well. But when you get those first few laughs, you're like, oh, I'm ready to do a big show now. Even if it's just 5 minutes, I can handle like a real crowd. And, they say to you, well, look, you're brand new, so you're not going to be ready. But we advise you to try and work on 5 good minutes. Put together 5 strong minutes that you can use to, we use the word showcase. It's really audition for a booker of a bigger show or at a club. And, every laugh, let's bring this back to sales. Every time someone laughs, or every joke that you have or bit that you have that gets consistent laughs, I call that like a closed deal. Like 90% of the audience laughs 90% of the time. That's money. Like
Right.
that goes into your set, because your goal is to build as many consecutive laughs as you can without a long break where people's faces light up, but not because they're having a good time, because they're on their phones. Like when we're bombing, we see that blue light go off from the stage, right? All around, all throughout the audience. So, but you do have to get up there, and it's kind of like figuring out your sales pitch. It's like, what am I going to deliver to this audience that they're going to relate to, understand, accept, give me an emotional reaction in return for accepting it as payment, and then give me more of their time and attention. And you have to figure out continuously, like, is this idea that I have, which I think people will like, is this palatable to them? And can I make it funny enough for them to pay me in terms of laughs? So you got to do a lot of open mics. You got to do a lot of sets. You got to bomb. Everyone, I think a lot of people know that by now. It's like, yeah, you got to bomb. And there were open mics that I would go to where it's like, I don't really care if I make any of these people laugh. I just need to get this idea out. I need to record it. I need to go back and listen to it. And sometimes you're doing an open mic for 5 people at a dive bar on a Sunday night. And that's where I go and try stuff. And you know what? If one of 5 of them kind of even chuckles or smiles at my idea, no matter how badly the other 4 took it, I'm like, there's something there, because that one person saw what I was going for. Now I have to go move the puzzle pieces around, do some edits and shorten and maybe punch it up and represent it somewhere else and see how that goes. And sometimes you abandon stuff, and sometimes the good stuff just keeps getting better every set and makes its way into your main set. So,
how much of it do you think is content and how much is delivery?
Look, confidence goes a long way in comedy. I think Dane Cook is a comedian that, like, I never cared for, but I think he sold things really well. Like, he was really confident. He had a bravado. And so delivery is huge, obviously. And I've watched some people with really brilliant jokes get no laughs because they have no confidence. They have no swagger. They have no timing, so to speak. So you need to balance both, because at the end of the day on stage, whether you want to be or not, you're a character. Mm-hmm. They don't know you. And you have to sort of like educate them on who you are and what you're all about. And your body language and your tone and your delivery is all part of that.
All right. And so back to the original question, those key ideas, those that you then say, there's something here, I want to begin to work it in. Are those things that just strike you out of the blue, or are they things that you really have to work hard to birth over time?
So I think a comedian's superpower, and I'm not claiming to have any superpowers here, is that we're observant and that we understand what's odd in society, what's incongruent, where are these moments that cause other people to react a certain way, uh, and again, like, have a unique take on something that's strange to us that other people will see. And that sometimes those moments happen and they're lightning and you just capture them. And, it used to be a notebook back in the day. We all have notes apps on our phones. I document those things right out of the gate. And then you sort of like just get the idea down. I like to come back and look at it a little later and then just stare at it through fresh eyes and figure out what else can I add to this. Is this funny on its own, or do I need to like now get the comedic muscles working a little bit to dress this up a little bit more? So look, some people are naturally like I don't consider myself really naturally funny. I'm not the life of the party. I'm not that person who's just saying things off the cuff, that's getting everyone to crack up. That's not really my style. I'm more of a that's interesting. I'm going to get that down on paper and mold that into something that suits my voice and my take. So every comedian's different. Hope that answers
The
the question.
two things that jump out of what you talked about. Number one is you talk about the process of refining and rehearsing and role playing and practicing the lines or whatever you call them. I'm thinking of salespeople. Salespeople have to rehearse relentlessly. Good sales managers run role plays until people are sick of doing role plays, and that's how they get better. It's doing reps. So that we're obviously going to dive in deep on comedy in terms of sales, and that's I think something that I want to keep in mind. The second thing about what you were saying really goes to the point that often in the industrial space, people say, "Oh, I got writer's block," as though they just need to somehow expect that this divine vision is going to descend upon them, and then suddenly they'll be able to grind out some kind of an article. The point, what I'm hearing you say is, yeah, it's great if you have those inspirations, but there's a process that you can sit down and you can ask questions, you can understand what's happening in a market, you can look for those incongruities, as you called it, and then you can begin to build material around it. And so even if nobody leaps out of bed in the morning excited about trying to write jokes, you can still come up with the material. Is that fair?
Look, it depends how introspective people are.
Right.
Um, I'll give I'll give three recommendations the way people can start to write. Forget even being funny. Number one is journal. Just dump, and if you're a salesperson, just maybe journal about your professional life. What clients did you talk to? What questions came up? What questions did you fail to ask? What went right? What went wrong? Who else was on the call? How did you react to that? What were the big objections? Like maybe just document it all. Whether you're a comedian or a salesperson, documenting it will just help you kind of like internalize it all. Let's face it, and then figure out, well, what from this do I want to work on,
Mm-hmm.
and let's talk about it more as a professional salesperson. If I write in my journal that they asked me a question about our pricing structure and I didn't know the answer or they objected to the way it was structured, maybe I need to have a better answer for that question next time, and I need to start thinking about that. And as you said, not only mastering the subject matter, but rehearsing it and know how to
Right.
deliver it. So journaling is one. The second is, this is a little more challenging, I think. I was good at it because I think I'm ADHD. I'm not diagnosed. Free writing, which is just grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, if you like, grab a Google Doc or a Microsoft Word doc or whatever. Just whatever's flowing in your brain, start typing and don't stop. And even if it's like, I'm stuck, right? I'm stuck. I have nothing to say. Where do I go from here? Why do some people have so many more thoughts than me? And literally just keep going, because eventually something will trigger something else.
Right.
And the point of free writing is not to have any clear or coherent thoughts. It's just to dump out what's in your brain, get your brain working a little bit.
That sounds like
Uh,
Julian Cameron in The Artist's Way.
could be. I don't know anything about either one of those, but I'll take your word for it. Uh, and then the third one is, and it's the one I'm not encouraging, but it's here, is generative AI. And look, I don't believe that generative AI should replace human communications, but it can give us the inputs that we
Right.
need for humans communication. So if we know how to ask the right questions, it'll spew us back a bunch of things we need to be thinking about, and we can pick and choose the words, the phrasing, the concepts, the ideas, the subject matter that goes into our talk track, content creation efforts,
Hmm.
presentations, whatever you feel. So those are three really good ways, I think, that you know whether you're in sales, whether you're in comedy, you can start to get that ball rolling on ideas for how to create, whether it's humor or whether it's content or whether it's refining your own process. I think all three of those things are great ways to start.
And do you do free writing yourself every day?
No, not every day, but once in a while when I'm trying to do some comedy, I will.
Got it.
I'm not really on stage much these days. Full disclosure, Ed. But like when I'm more about like I have the ideas. I'm able to, because most people will see something in life that's odd or bizarre and like, oh, that was odd or bizarre. Whereas I'm the guy who's capturing on his phone and trying to capture like everything I saw,
Right.
and I'll just work on that. Because even if I was to be doing comedy, I wouldn't be on stage every night, like 4 times a night. I'd be on stage twice a week at this phase of my life and career.
Hmm.
So I'd pick a few ideas and kind of harness those, test them, refine them if they aren't going well. And if they're really not going well, I abandon them and choose something else. Like you have to be judicious with and careful with what you're investing your time on stage into,
Right.
because you get 5, 7, 10 minutes. You don't have the whole night to, hey, I got these 90 ideas I want to run by this crowd and see what you're good. You have to pick two or three. You also, it's kind of gutsy to go up there with all brand new material. It's always healthy to start strong with a joke that works. Like my go-to joke for years was, no, I did not play Ross and Monica's dad on Friends. For people of an older generation, that means no, I'm not Elliot Gould. And then I'd close with something that worked.
Hmm.
And maybe I had a bomb joke in there to save one of the new bits. Because you can't just bomb for 5 minutes. Like after a certain point in your time on stage, you don't have it in you to just say, I'm getting up there and I'm getting no laughs because I want to go through these 5 minutes. It feels like you're cheating people who are investing their time.
Right.
So that leaves like probably 3 minutes for new ideas. And each minute, that probably means two, maybe three new ideas in that 3 minutes.
Okay. You're Canadian. You're in Montreal. Is there a difference between American and Canadian senses of humor?
Yeah, I would say so.
In what way?
Look, I'm in Quebec, and it's a totally different part. It's different than Montreal. It's sort of like saying, do people in New York have a different sense of humor than people in Mississippi?
Do people in New York have a sense of humor?
I would say so. I think they have great senses of humor. Do people in
Really?
the New England area have that? Not have a sense of humor, because I do believe they do. I think everybody has a sense of humor. But do people in you know I don't know, the interior of California have the same sense of humor as people from New England? And the answer is, I mean, yeah, they can both laugh at some things, but they might find other things different.
Hmm.
Um, so here in Canada, look, we're a little drier. We have a bit more of our nation has a bit more British heritage still baked into us. And there's a bit of that drier sarcasm. We're a little more low key with how we present and speak and tell jokes, kind of thing. I would say that's the big difference. I mean, that's we also laugh at some of the same dumb things that you guys do. Some things are universal.
Right. I recently interviewed Carol Mahoney for this podcast, and she discussed her book, Buyer for Selling. And in that book, she referenced a study on the topic of humor in sales written by 3 other folks from Montreal as well. And I don't hear a lot about this topic in general. So my question is it purely random that that I've just encountered this cell of interest in it in Montreal, or is there something in the water up there or the ice or whatever that really stimulates the topic?
This has been pontificated upon for a really long time. Look, Montreal, it's our first year where we're not having the Just for Laughs festival, and that was the big festival in comedy for a long time. It's we'll see if it comes back, but it's gone for this year, and we won't get into that. look, we're indoors a lot because of the cold weather. Um, we get to observe America also.
Hmm.
We all grew up on American television. Like we have Canadian television, but we're watching. I mean, when I was growing up, I was watching ABC, NBC, CBS. We didn't have Fox for quite a while here, but we're absorbing American culture, and that's sometimes our lens into the world. And but at the same time, we're like, well, we're not them. So that could be a big part of things. And in Quebec and Montreal alone, like we're different than the rest of Canada. So obviously, we're a bilingual society. Um, I mean, I don't know if people in Quebec have a monopoly on this topic. I mean, I've seen some other stuff on it, but I mean, I think it just goes without saying that people like to buy from people that they trust, but they
Hmm.
also, to trust them, need to like them. Like you don't have to like the person you buy from, but it certainly helps.
Yeah, and trust, I think, is definitely a theme that we're gonna dig into coming up here soon. Just kind of wrapping up on the comedy piece. When you do get up on stage, are you nervous beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, but you're not nervous where you have stage fright and you can't do it, but there's a million things that go up that go through your head as you're waiting for them to call your name. Because I might go into a show with a certain agenda of what I want to talk about and the bits I want to deliver, the order I want to deliver them in. And then I'll get there and I'll watch the opening salvos where the MC warms up the crowd and asks them who's visiting from out of town or who's here as a couple, or kind of look at them and you see they're younger or older. And I'll look at my jokes. I'm like, oh no, that one won't work because these people are from out of town. This one won't work because they're a little older and they might not get some pop culture reference I want to make. And you sort of like while you have the time, whether you're up first or fifth or whatever, you have to rejig your set and then reprogram your brain a little bit. And that's what makes me nervous.
Got it.
I'm not too nervous to go up there and fail, although it's not what you want to do, unless it's, again, you're working on some new material. You sort of have to embrace the failure that's going to happen. Um, but yeah, I mean, if you're not nervous, it means you don't care. It's cliche, but it's true.
Yeah, it is absolutely true. How did you mash? I don't completely understand mashing together travel and comedy. How did you make
Uh,
that work? What was the idea behind that?
well, maybe it's a good segue to all the stuff we're going to talk to about sales. Um, at the end of the day, that we have all kinds of demographics in society, and thanks to the internet, it's easier than ever to produce a comedy show that caters to a certain demographic. So for the longest time, there's comedy shows for this cultural group or this religious group. There's shows for superhero fans. Like tonight, it's all jokes about superheroes or pro wrestling or Star Wars or the cooking show. Like we've moved there. I used to travel quite a bit and backpack and stuff like that. And when I started doing comedy, I'm like, it'd be really cool if I could do comedy down here in these beachy communities, kind of for all the travelers who speak English. Like if you're in a beach town, there's like a couple of things tonight. There's three things you could do on any given night. You could get drunk, you can watch a bad Bob Marley cover band, or you could do both of those things at once. And so I said, let's bring some different kind of entertainment. And originally, it was just sort of like I want to perform. I want to perform outside of Montreal. I want to travel, and I would put these shows together. I team up with nonprofits down there who would market the shows not so much to travelers, but to expat communities who were living down there, and it became a great fundraising vehicle.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, people who travel or people who live abroad, they all have similar sensibilities, and you can create a certain kind of humor for them.
Right.
And I mean, every destination lends to different kinds of humor that everyone appreciates. So I'm not going to tell you this business made me rich because it was a little bit ahead of its time and it didn't succeed. It wasn't predicated upon selling tickets where I saw the money. I was probably 4 years too early with a lot of things, without really the social media expertise to get it done properly. But yeah, I just felt it'd be really cool to create this virtual comedy club that people who are traveling in any major destination could go, oh, a comedy abroad show that was my company, Comedy Abroad. A comedy abroad show is happening, and we're going to go see it because it's going to be something good, We'll meet some other travelers or expats. And it was a little too ambitious, let's just say.
Got it. So when you were selling enterprise software, ERP systems for Oracle, and you had this comedy itch that was going on, were you consciously using humor as part of your sales approach? Were you doing it subconsciously? Did you incorporate it later deliberately? How did that evolve?
When I was at Oracle, like when I was in my real sales career, I never fit. Always felt that I don't fit into this culture.
Well, you
We'd get
described that
together.
from your interview at the beginning.
Say that again.
You described that from your interview at the beginning, where you kind of took this irreverent approach to it.
I just remember going to certain like meetings and going, God, everyone takes this stuff so seriously, and it's like it's my job. I'm not. Maybe some people like money more than I do, as evidenced by the fact that I went into comedy. But like, I just was like, I don't want to spend my life worrying about, does this CIO have the right dashboards and ETL tools they need to populate their reports and suck data out from data sources and get the data cleansed. And I was like, I look, it's kind of cool on a certain level, intellectual level, but to talk like I was like, I've never been a CIO, I've never been a CFO, I've never been a CEO, and here I am, and I've never used this stuff. I've never built anything with stuff. And here I am, I'm telling you, ours is the greatest. It's better than the other companies. I've never used the other company stuff either. And there was something like I don't like this term, but I guess I'm starting to come around to it. Imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Like just like who am I to be telling these people how to run their business? Um, and so I always was like a little bit. I looked how buttoned up and serious some of the reps I worked with were, and I'd be like, I can't be these guys. Like I'm just, I never had like stock humor that I use, but I was always a friendly, self-deprecating guy. Like I'm just here to help,
Right.
and I'll get you the right resources. So I wouldn't say I used a comedic approach when I started, but I will share where the idea of what I do today first cropped up. I was on a demo for global financial consolidation software. Ed, you've lit up with joy just as I could just tell how excited you were with each syllable that I was delivering there. I think you might have even fallen asleep while I said it. And I had a sales engineer, pre-sales engineer, who would do the demo. He was a financial expert. He was dry. He was boring. He had an accent that was a little monotone. And I remember like my role in these demos, and this was a virtual demo before that was even normal. Um, my role was to kind of synthesize the findings from our discovery, what the big pain points they told us they wanted to solve were. Let them just give a reminder of who we are, even though they're a customer and they know who we are. But more importantly, to say, hey, you told us that A, B, and C were big problems in your global financial consolidation process. We're going to show you over the next 60 minutes how Oracle addresses those three. And I mean, you've told us you're good with the quote, and that it's within your budgetary range. If we show you those three things, is there any reason why you wouldn't sign with us today? So that's my role. And once the demo starts and he starts guiding them on the screen through the financial consolidation process, again, it's so painful to say even. I sort of like tune out a little bit. I drift off. Like, you have your ear to the ground a little bit to just make sure that nothing's going wrong or you don't have to interject. But at one point he told them this joke. Like I heard the laugh really. And I don't even remember what the joke was, but he told them a joke about global financial consolidation. They all laughed. So this is like a controller and a CFO and a VP of finance on the call. And they're all laughing. I was like, wow, he must have said that off the top of his head. A month later, I had a demo for the same solution with the same guy. He told that joke again and he got the same reaction. And the clients are laughing. It's super dry. The whole thing is super boring. But he got a laugh because he touched on something that they're struggling with on a day-to-day basis. And he showed them he got their pain. I was like, that's pretty interesting. And then I went to my colleagues. I said, has he ever told this joke on your demo? And they're like, he does that on every demo. And that's when I first realized that like selling can have moments of joy. But more importantly, you can You don't need to deviate from the subject matter
Right.
to to elicit those moments of joy and empathy.
Right.
So that's where I was like, you could write jokes about, and then when I started doing comedy, again, shows for different ethnic groups, shows for superhero nerds, shows for Star Wars, you could write a joke about, um, you know, manufacturing challenges. You can write a joke about the technology, how the product roadmap in manufacturing software is stalled. You can write a joke to make any point you want
Sure.
to any type of audience. So that's the evolution of all this.
And my understanding is that you really jumped into software as you've developed this business model to help companies develop and incorporate humor. You knew software, you'd been in software. That was kind of the first place you went. But I think lately you've been diversifying them. We are in touch because you're looking more at manufacturing and industrial. And I've got, I hope I'm not going to embarrass myself. I think we had a conversation recently about how you've even been focusing on dentists. Was that you, or is that somebody else I was talking to about something completely different?
No, that's me. I've listen. Tech has not been the healthiest economy the last couple of years. It feels like this. It was always a bizarre world. Like it was skyrocketing when the rest of the world was struggling, and now the rest of the world feels like it's coming back and it's struggling. So, I've targeted. I've headed to a lot of trade shows to just try and network and meet people.
I see
I
the
went to
badges on the wall behind you. It looks like you've barely got any time in your office at home.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of conferences, a lot of trade shows over the last several years, and I like going to trade shows. I like doing things in person versus this is great and all, but there's something about being in a live setting that we always took for granted.
Sure.
I've been to trade shows for manufacturing supplies and equipment, mining supplies and equipment, dentistry supplies and equipment, optometrist supplies and equipment, um, cybersecurity, which is still tech, but it's recession proof. It's just a
Hmm.
different beast than most software companies. I was at an HVAC show not that like a year ago. So yeah, I've stepped out of the whole tech space quite a bit.
When you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I think just over a year ago, your message started with this connection request is colder than a manufacturing sale exec sweat during unplanned downtime. And I know I've seen similar versions of that on your website.
Okay.
Is that a common technique that you find works in many situations?
Absolutely. I call that the cold opener because whether we're cold calling, cold emailing, sending a connection request, we have mere seconds to highlight our relevance, to let them know that, look, hey, you don't know me. So like brace yourself and kind of get a positive reaction from them that earns more time and attention.
And
So I have a course, and this isn't meant to be a pitch, but it'll end up being one called Cold Openers, where people can create their own bespoke, hyper relevant icebreakers for 7 kinds of cold outreach. So that's absolutely a technique that I preach and practice. And I've gotten people telling me, my go-to one in software is it's called colder than the relationship between sales and marketing. And I've had people tell me this is the greatest cold call opener. This is the greatest LinkedIn connection request. Like I get that. It's not uncommon that people applaud me for it. So that's why I figured I'd try it on you and see how that could work.
And do you have any data benchmarking the percent of responses for that as opposed to a typical outreach?
No,
No.
nobody ever wants to track data for stuff like this. Like they say they do, but then when you ask them to, they don't. I
Right.
do have a client who crushed it at trade shows with jokes, to greet people at the booth, like highlighting the problems they solve. I have another client who not only closed revenue, and he didn't even tally it, but he's like, we close deals off this stuff,
Well,
off a
you got a
cold
lot of
email.
great testimonials on your site. Clearly, there's people who have figured out how to use this and make it work.
Yeah, and I think even more, just appreciate the process
Right.
because the process and that same client that closed revenue, undisclosed amount of revenue over email, he said you need to stop selling the jokes. His name is Jason Westbecker. He's at a company called TrustArc. He's the CEO now. He says you need to stop selling the value of like a joke and I don't a one liner, some humor, an icebreaker. He's like the process was where my team won. He's like the process you put us through to write this humor allowed them to really master what problems do we solve for who and find a creative way to say it in simple English that reinforced all the knowledge, even if they never used or told a joke. So that's tough to measure, but he was able to say that he lowered ramp time by X amount of days and led to them hitting numbers in their first quarter.
But that's something that the what's the right way to say it? The process that the journey that your process takes companies through results in these bits of humor, but results in a lot more awareness. I mean, you've got a great quote that I pulled out of, and I assume you do it for a pattern interrupt, your quote unquote 97-second intro video. You say the process of crafting humor to specifically make your target persona smile will force your reps to master the business acumen they need to increase their subject matter expertise. And it sounds like exactly what Jason was speaking to.
Yeah, I got the quote. It was a moment for me because coming from Oracle, they train you all the time. So, for example, when you're selling ERP, you're selling software to every. They use the phrase line of business or business function within a company. So, if let's say you're always working with a rep who has the manufacturing patch. So you need to be aware of the modules that service finance, order management, the manufacturing process, the supply chain tools, the sales software. Then human resource procurement was a big one for all the parts you need. I think MRP is the term. Is it MRP? Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been years since I talked about this stuff. And so that's a lot of like siloed business knowledge you need to have a meaningful conversation with a company. And they were constantly training us. Again, I've been exposed to this in school, but when you're getting trained by Oracle, the pieces are starting to come together about real world, how this works in the real world. When I started to work with SaaS companies, and Oracle was training us, like we had weekly training, we had broader quarterly training, like usually a bigger sales training, and then like a weekly product training. At one point you're like, can you stop training us? I just want to go hit my numbers. I can do this without you. Kind of resentful and bitter there. But then lost my train of thought.
About the process of learning about the business so that you master it.
And then when I started, thank you. And then when I started working with software companies, smaller ones, much smaller ones than Oracle, I didn't realize that they don't invest in their people this way. Like I had been away from software sales. I'd never worked in a small company like that. 100-person software company that's venture funded. They're trying to hit these numbers that someone cooked up, in a trailer lab where they're also maybe making chemicals and selling them. Who knows? But I didn't realize that most of the sales and marketing people that they hire, they're not very consultative. They're scared to talk to buyers because they have that imposter syndrome. They struggle to articulate what are the top 3 problems that we eliminate. They know how to pitch. They can say we're an AI-driven engagement platform. We 10x your scalability and offer you into a demo right away, like nobody's business. but they can't like say, so what's bugging you today? And
right.
The prospect will tell them a few problems. How is that hurting your business? Who else is it hurting? What are the big objectives? What are the big objectives for the business? In the next 3 years, like where do you guys want to go? They don't know how to have these conversations, and I realized like that the process I would put them through, I would need to sort of like help them get that all down on paper in a way that would lead to meaningful humor. Because when I would have them answer certain questions beforehand by themselves in their breakout groups, and I'd say, "What problem do you solve?" They wouldn't answer that question,
right?
And then I would say, well, what else is going to happen if this problem persists? They would just say, oh, we saved them time and money. And I'd be like, oh my God, this.
But they'd have a formulaic ROI to demonstrate how that was true.
Kind of, yeah. But either way, it's like, I'm like, guys, every business problem on the planet's like costs time and money to the person that's struggling with it. You need to unpack that and tell a bit more of a story and get granular.
So I love how your work is a forcing function to actually make companies step back, understand the business outcomes, why they're important, and that kind of stuff. But let's talk a little bit more about the psychology of humor itself. I mean, why does humor work well in sales?
There's a few reasons. It's empathetic. If it's done right and it connects with the audience, it's empathetic. Like, oh, I have that problem too. Like if you think about comedians, they get on stage and they talk about things that everyday people struggle with, whether it's their relationship, whether it's their kids, whether it's dirty socks on the floor. Uh, the old one is airplane food. Like, these are all things we know about and can't stand. And when people are like in the audience, like, yeah, that's so true. I hate that, and we laugh at that.
Right.
But the other element I would say is, like, when it's packaged up properly, there's an element of surprise. People don't see it coming. Um, so when you could show people you understand their pain, their tragedy, and the absurdity of their jobs, and the way their company is currently doing things, and also just package it up in a way that they didn't expect, you're going to get a laugh, and they're going to say, this person really gets me.
So as I was thinking about this and getting ready for our conversation, the way I kind of tried to distill it was that first, it helps build comfort and rapport, which is important in terms of prospecting. Second, there's a pattern interrupt to break through the noise because everyone's so overwhelmed with all this formulaic crap coming at them.
Yep.
And third, it's a way to evoke the emotion that's so fundamentally important to make consultative sales effective. Is that a fair way to break it down, do you think?
These are things that I really talked about when I started. And as I've been in this business now for 7 years, like, you're still correct. That's all correct. That's actually probably the most important stuff. Breaks through the noise, demonstrate that you understand their challenge, that empathy. There was something else you said in there. The pattern interrupt. Absolutely, because so many traditional sales methodology guys, they teach you like these stock like ways to open, which
Right.
everyone's doing it. Like,
Right.
hey, I know I caught you out of the blue. Can I have 27 seconds of your time to tell you if the reason of my call? Like, everyone's doing that. That was supposedly the pattern interrupt, but now that's just the pattern. So we need to cut through the noise. We need to be different, and we need to be relevant, and we need to do it fast,
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we're strictly talking about the use case of prospecting. So that, thank you for reminding me, because that's at the top of it all. And of course, if I can make you laugh, you're going to like me.
Right.
If I can make you laugh about a problem that, yeah, I am struggling, you're not only going to like me, but you're going to trust me. And then I have credibility.
But you said you talked about that stuff at the beginning. I sensed there was a but I don't anymore because something, and instead I talk about this.
Because you know what? It's like, when you're a solopreneur, and this is just me being vulnerable, when you're a solopreneur, you're always trying to find the magic bullet for what's going to resonate with your target market. And I realized that, sure, everyone wants to break through the noise, at least in tech. But I realized the bigger problem is they don't know how to break through the noise because they don't understand their buyers and the problems that they're struggling with. Like, you
Right.
can't figure out how to break through the noise in a meaningful way unless you understand what's going on here.
Right.
Why should these people care about me? How can I make their lives better? So I now use kind of the everything up to the joke. Sure, our mission is to write some jokes, but I'm more focused that they absorb everything else, the subject matter, how to just speak comfortably, ditch the buzzwords. If they can write a good joke and then deliver it, fantastic. If they just want jokes, I can write them for them. So I've moved away from sort of speaking about that more. People are still attracted to that story, but I think the bigger challenge in most sales orgs, tech or non, is being able to be a consultative subject matter expert to your prospects.
So the pattern
And
interrupt is to get them to stop vomiting this crap up and to actually talk about the prospect's business. That's the real pattern interrupt we're looking for.
yeah, in tech, I mean, it's a younger sales force, and they're really married to their buzzwords and their phrases that marketing is programming them with sometimes. Or
Right.
these aren't, people don't talk in this buzzword language. I mean, in Silicon Valley, maybe they do a little bit, but like, I don't know. I think sales. I think the more senior you go, the more bare bones language ends up. The more valuable the bare bones language is.
So if we boil it all down, it sounds like we're talking about building trust, whether it's the trust that comes with a little bit of rapport up front or the trust that comes with demonstrating in a simple and efficient way that you empathize and understand their business issues. But it's about trust, and then that trust is critical in order to enable good consultative sales.
I would say so, because like if you know, four salespeople knock on an executive's door and they take a long time to get to the real root of a problem, but someone could like,
Right.
hit them with a bit of humor right out of the gate. You're going to be like, whoa, I've been talking to so many sales reps and none of them get that that's the biggest threat in my industry right now.
Right.
I'm just picking on a threat because you can write a joke about anything or problem or whatever.
What do you think people get wrong about the idea of humor in business?
Oh my God, where do we begin? How much longer we got? Wow. I think let's start with the fact that look, my business, for better or for worse, is called Comedy Writing for Revenue Teams. We talked about it earlier. People think that, oh, comedy, I took an improv class once. Improv is great for sales. I'm like, no, I'm the exact opposite. Like, I'm more about like creating scripted moments that flick on emotional switches with prospects and the journey of doing that. So, number one, they think I'm improv. Number two, they think sometimes I use the word jokes, and maybe some people who have been listening today have heard me use that term. I don't mean a rabbi, a priest, and a minister walk into a bar and say offensive things to each other. I don't mean that kind of joke. I just mean a quick one or two liner that offers some relevance to the listener and then subverts their expectations in a way that makes them go, oh man, that's so real. So those are two things. The third is, I think a lot of people hear comedy and jokes and they think it's going to be offensive. So it's kind of like tied to what I just said. But you don't have, like, comedians, the best ones in the world are not the offensive ones. They're the clean ones who get to the funny and say powerful things without resorting to assaulting language.
Right.
So I think those are three really big things that people get wrong about me, or that I'm just a comedian who comes and tells sales jokes to their team.
All right. So you don't just come and tell sales jokes. Let's talk more specifically about how you do work with companies. You've alluded to the process you take them through. I know you have workshops that lead to 18 different steps or outcomes along the way. What's the most common model for how you work with a company?
Companies come to me for two reasons. They want their team to learn some new skills. They want to have a fun team building experience. And they want them to hopefully figure out how can we stand out. Like, they have this mix of issues we've talked about. So in that case, they'll bring me in for a workshop. I do 2, 4, 8-hour kind of workshops. Just depends on what they want to accomplish, what their challenges are, and how much they want to invest in their people and in me.
Does it have to be in person, or can you do them by Zoom?
Can do them by Zoom. And in fact, something that's weird about Zoom is it kind of yields, if you want your, I think it yields to better results overall.
Really?
Yeah, because how often do we go to a workshop that takes place in a linear time frame, 2, 4, 8 hours, and we learn so much and we just go and we implement it? I think that's really rare. I think learning happens over time and reinforcement and building block approach, because everything I teach is a building block approach where, all right, guys, we're going to get the truth down on paper. Let's just master what problems are we solving? What are the impacts of not solving it? Who's affected? How does it prevent them from achieving their objectives? Let's just get all this knowledge on paper. Let's make sure we're working with the best stuff. And then let's try and like go through a process to convert some of this stuff into something funny that makes a powerful point.
Mm-hmm.
And to do it all in one day is a lot.
Doing that first part's a lot for many of these companies that just recite this litany of technical details about what they sell. Simply backing up and thinking about it from the customer perspective is a huge accomplishment. That's not easily done in any time frame.
You know what? When I started this, I would just leave it to them to do it, and then I realized their answers were garbage. And so I started to fist it. Granted, it was a bit of a kismet because I was booked to do a gig, I'll name drop, for Canon Solutions America right before the pandemic. And they were bringing reps from all around the country. So I was like, I think we need, I don't know why I had the idea, but I'm like, I need to facilitate their pre-work. So I got in a Zoom call with each breakout group of like 4 or 5 people. I guide them through questions, and I realized there's a lot of good debate that comes up.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were like, well, that's not that important. That doesn't happen. I've seen that once. This other impact is really the bigger issue that most of my clients avoid. And they started to learn from each other through that tribal knowledge sharing.
Right.
And that led to the starting point for them writing their jokes, which they did a 5-hour workshop on site. It went pretty well. Like, they got up there and they delivered jokes. We have an open mic at the end where they have to literally get up there. I MC it.
Neat.
So I think that over time, though, like, the pandemic showed me how no one wants to stare at a screen for 8 hours. So we do like 1.5 hour sessions over a period of time. And I would challenge them like to think about things in between sessions. And some did it. Most didn't, but some did. And I like to say that in every workshop, there's always like 20% of the people are like, I get what this guy's doing, and this is mind blowing, and I love this.
Yeah, sure.
80%,
There's a Pareto distribution like everything in life.
yeah, exactly. And there's 20% of people who are like, I'm naturally funny. I don't need this. He can't teach me anything. I'm like, all right. And there's a whole group of people in the middle who are like getting bits and pieces from it,
Right.
but they're working to their sales game. And like that, like I said, there's that 20% who's like, we wrote a joke. I'm using this. I'm going to work it into my prospecting, my demos, my presentations, you name it. And they make it their own, and they even want to work on them in their own time. So that's a workshop. But the other time companies call me is they need messaging that breaks through the noise, whether it's for cold outreach, whether it's for trade show booth engagement, whether it's for building out content for social media. And they'll call me, and I have an offer called Humor as a Service, which is me being consultant. I understand what points you want to press upon who. Choose a persona, choose a couple of points. Give me access to about 6 or 7 or 8 of your subject matter experts. I'll facilitate a few group calls, ask them all the questions, and then I'll go write them 20 to 30 jokes and help them adapt them to their particular needs. Do you need them for cold emails? Do you want training on how to use these jokes for engaging visitors to your trade show booth versus saying, hey, can I scan your badge, or do you want some swag, or yeah, what brings you here today? Tell them a joke. Tell them a joke about, you want to hear a joke about supply chain challenges in 2020, 24. All right, what do you got? And if they laugh, we just want to know, well, why are you laughing at that? And there's the conversation that exhibitors really need to be having with attendees at trade shows. So I kick in some coaching hours to help them figure out how do we exploit this stuff.
And when you do a workshop, how long? What's the right way to ask the question? What's the lead time to get ready for it? How much prep is necessary? If somebody calls you, you agree to commercials today. Is that something that you can do next Monday, or does it take 6 weeks to get ready for?
Not 6 weeks, and not next Monday.
Okay.
Look, I have one workshop called Cold Openers, which is meant to be an out of the box, no pre-work kind of thing. I still like to facilitate pre-work. I think it leads to better results because I think that's where the real win is, in that tribal knowledge sharing bit. So I like, if someone calls me up with 2 weeks notice, shouldn't be a problem to schedule, to get the breakout groups organized. And I don't want to see 5 junior reps in a breakout group. I don't want to see 5 senior ones. I want the junior ones learning from the senior ones.
Right.
And sometimes the junior ones bring more creativity to the game too. So it's like a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, they don't have necessarily all the head trash that interferes with their listening to what buyers are saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think I've got kind of a natural bias about your work because of the way we initially connected. I think of it as primarily around prospecting, but you've talked about cold outreach, but you've also talked about events. You've talked about trade shows. I assume networking. I know that you talk some about sales enablement. So your work helps companies across the entire customer life cycle. Is that fair?
I think so. Like, I even sometimes struggle how to market myself because, well, I'm helping sales, but I'm helping marketing, and I'm also helping enablement, and I'm helping the events people, helping the sales developers who are making the cold calls. So, yeah, I like to think that I'm sort of like a go-to-market. I don't know. I don't like calling myself this, but like the wolf in Pulp Fiction. Like, he takes care of some problems that some people don't always see or know how to deal with.
This all makes so much sense, and it is kind of intuitively appealing. So, given that, why is it that so many of us default to this horrendous corporate babble that's so dreadfully boring? I mean, it's not the way we chat in person. What you're saying makes so much sense, but why is that the default?
I think people are just scared to take risks. There's a reason why most employees that you and I talk to aren't the entrepreneurs themselves.
Right.
I find sales leaders are open to it. As you move down the food chain, people like marketing. Marketing is surprising. Marketing is like so scared to take risks.
Right.
They're very conservative. Enablement sometimes gets it, sometimes they don't. You talk to a longtime salesperson, they're like, yeah, you need some personality in this game. Like it's usually the leadership who gets it because they've been there. But you also get some uptight leaders who are like, we sell very serious stuff and our customers are very serious people and we can't afford to make jokes about their problems. I'm like, get over yourself. Like I think like there was one kid who watched me on a webinar. Like he wasn't even a client. He took what I said, he wrote some humor, and he was selling. I've had two instances where they sell to cybersecurity professionals. They created memes, they created jokes, and he's like, "This worked like a charm." I was trying to get a hold of this guy for a long time, and he got back to me finally.
Well,
And I'll deal with like senior leadership, and they're like, "Cybersecurity is not a laughing matter." I'm like, "Do you really think that these people who work in cybersecurity, that's all they're doing is like it's their job. They still
right.
go to sleep and watch Star Wars. And I'm generalizing now, but like they still have fun in life and they take their job seriously. But for them, it's not life or death the way your sales number is for you. So stop being so scared to try something new and a little different. And just remember that the people you sell to are just that. They're people.
So cybersecurity people do other stuff for fun in life. I've got the sense that your brain is probably racing all the time. It's probably just the way that you're built. That's my sense, and I don't want to promulgate any of the tropes about how you're a hockey fan. So let me ask you, what do you do for fun, and how do you turn your mind off?
Oh, it never turns off.
No,
That's for sure. Like you know this, when you're a solopreneur, there's always something to work on. So and there's lots of little things that your brain, because it moves fast, doesn't want to work on. So that's a
right.
problem. So I'm good at being vulnerable. I can admit my flaws and my faults. Hockey is not a priority for me these days. It hasn't been for since the Montreal Canadiens started to stink in the late '90s or something like that. I how do I spend my time? I mean, I collect vinyl and I love to go to record stores, and I even like shopping for it and looking for it and hunting
So
for it and
out of
discovering.
your collection, then, how'd you pick the one you got on the wall behind you?
Oh, that was way before I started. I even had a record player. Like I only bought a turntable about 2 years ago, but I wanted some albums because it's great art. So there we go. I wanted some albums of artists I like to be on my wall because I've always been a music guy. And what do I need a picture of some impressionist? I don't know. I'm not even gonna get some postmodern pot of flowers when there's perfectly good art that represents another kind of art form I love. So
So you
that,
didn't put together your COVID bookcase like so many people did.
no, I watched. I put together my COVID Netflix list and
There you go.
blazed through it. Yeah.
I listened to you and Andy Paul on the Ring DNA Sales Enablement podcast, and you emphasize the importance of practice. Delivery matters, rehearsal, coaching, role playing. I find that there's a lack of role playing and coaching and accountability with most sales managers and their teams. So when you do a workshop, how do you make sure that after you do that improv block at the end, that this stuff actually sticks?
So no improv. Let's just make sure we know that. they,
Wrong
they,
term.
they,
Sorry.
that's okay. They're gonna they're gonna work on some. I challenge each breakout group to write 5 to 10 jokes. I teach them a few formulas for jokes because jokes are formulas. I just want to make that clear. Like that this call is colder than blank. It's a formula, and we just have to find the formula that works for us. So I like them getting up there and delivering their jokes. And again, like I don't think most people are going to use this stuff in a deliberate way when it's done. I don't expect them to. When I started, I thought more would. They don't, and that's why I talk about the process more. I think there's a couple that will always grab it for cold calls and use it, that cold openers approach. But in the tech world for a long time, they were really dependent on cold email. And the humor that they would write or that I would write for them is just a great hook. It starts off with a chuckle, segues to a serious impact statement about what the chuckle is, the topic the chuckle is highlighting. It's shining a light on a problem, if you will, painting a picture. And then it's a call to action. So when it comes to practice, I include some coaching hours on my workshops, and just comes down to what are they looking to work on? Do they want more LinkedIn connection requests and a more deliberate approach? Do they want to figure out how to write better emails? do they want to practice those cold calls, which I encourage them to do. And some are up for it and some aren't.
Right.
So it just depends on what leadership is trying to achieve and the channels they use based on the team they have.
When you're working with a client, who do you find is most excited about your work? The management, executive management, or the marketing folks, or the sales folks, or the reps themselves, the individual contributors? Is there any group that typically embraces it more than others?
I think it comes down to the personalities. I don't think it's role specific. So there's I've dealt with people from any go-to-market function: sales leadership, marketing middle management, sales middle management, enablement, you name it. There's always someone who loves what I do and is super excited and loves comedy and just wants something different. Most importantly, they want something different. We've brought in sales methodology X and command of the challenge and force the way through, like whatever. It's all these names, where you're spending like God knows how much money, and they're just like they're all the same. And I'm not saying they're all the same. I've done a bunch of methodologies, and I always take away a good thing or two from them. And that's really all you want. You want your team to take away one or two things from every sales training. So I always get people. I think it comes down to the personality versus the role. There's always people who are like skeptical of what I do. And I've had enough people come up to me saying, I heard we were doing this. I was like, what the hell is this going to be? And they come up to me and they're like, I'm really glad we did this. Because they'll never, this might tie up a lot of points that we're trying to, or we've been discussing. When you're watching a comedian up there, you have most people have no appreciation for the journey they took to get up there and make you laugh.
Right.
And salespeople need to take that same journey to connect with prospects and to come off as professional.
Amen.
And polished and know what they're talking about and be confident in their answers.
Right.
And not be confident because you're lying through your teeth. Be confident because you know your stuff.
Right.
So that's really what I want people to take away from it. And the name might put off some people. The idea of jokes and comedy definitely puts some people off. But when they go through it, they come up to me and they're like, I didn't expect that.
Go ahead.
How
about sales kickoffs? Some of the most dreadful wastes of time in most cases, and such a tragedy because they could be so powerful. If you were going to help somebody optimize their sales kickoff, what would you recommend, and how might your work fit into that?
Yeah. Sales kickoffs, I have a love-hate relationship with because I think I'm great for them. But look, if some people like want an impact, I don't know, maybe I read too much into the way they think. But some people are like, what can you do in 45 minutes that will have an impact on our team? Like, I don't know, I can make the dials for them. Forget sales kickoff, just bring me on, I'll make some dials. But I don't want to do that, and you won't like my fee. It just depends how much time they have. I created some really specific sales kickoff offers because I know a lot of people we don't want to do more than 2 hours. You have 1 hour. That's the most common. What can you do in an hour?
Right.
And so I kind of thought about it. How can I get the team involved? How can I give my keynote or whatever you want to call it, my presentation? How can I show them how humor really can be a powerful way to show your prospects you get their challenges and their pains and the pains which you can solve for them. So I have this offer called it's called the SKO comedy show. So the sales kickoff comedy show. And what it is I ask management if they're booking me out far in advance, give me 5 to 10 people who will go through my workshop virtually in the weeks leading up to sales kickoff. They're going to write some jokes. I'm going to write some jokes about, again, points we wish to impress upon our target persona. So let's say it's a vice president of manufacturing. Let's say it's a head of procurement. We sell to those people. We're going to write jokes that highlight our value and the problems we solve to that specific group of people. I'm going to give my keynote, and then I'm going to MC a show where I bring up those 5 to 10 people, and they have to deliver jokes. Then I'll deliver some jokes that I write. So it's kind of like, it's like a little show that we put on at the end, and it's meant to get some people involved. People love to do stuff for their peers. And And the right people are going to be like, I want to go through this. Because not everyone wants to go through what I put them through. Some people are like, I don't want to write a joke. I don't know how to do that. I don't need to
Sure.
do that.
Right.
And that's fine. I don't want to work with those people. I want to work with the ones who are like, I need new tools. I force them to practice. We definitely do some delivery in advance. And one thing to answer your question about practice, I could never have gotten better at stand up if I didn't practice. And also, if I didn't listen to my video recordings, watch and listen to my video recordings and be failing.
Right.
And a lot of comedians are like, I can't do that. I can't watch myself when I fail. I'm like, then don't.
Right.
But you're going to get up there and make the same mistakes over and over. And I've watched a lot. One of my topics when I speak to teams is, what can we learn from really bad stand-up comedians that never get booked beyond, like they just do open mics and they never get asked to do a proper show for $20. One of the things is they don't practice. They don't reflect on their failures. And those are maybe some of the two biggest. So hopefully I answered a question which you asked a while back in a roundabout way.
Yeah, absolutely. Just back to that coaching and role playing. They're so critical and it's so rarely done well. How about when you want to learn more, when you're trying to collect new ideas, not necessarily ideas for humor, but ideas about business, where do you go? What blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels? What do you follow?
I'm on LinkedIn a lot. And I feel there's enough there. You get enough of a smattering of a variety. I have 15,000 connections. So I see lots of stuff
Right.
that the algorithm wants to show me, of course. I realize like there's a lot of voices I'm not seeing that I would like to be seeing. I try to find out who do I need to follow so I get their content sent to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say it's LinkedIn. I find it hard to bounce around between blogs, and I got to admit, I don't really want to listen to. I listen to some podcasts on how to run my business as a solopreneur, as a speaker, coach, trainer, consultant, whatever you want to call me.
Right.
But I don't listen to too many sales podcasts. I'm just like, I got a lane. I know what my lane is. Sometimes I'll listen to the technology, sales technology podcasts, because they're delivery mechanisms for the art that we create,
Right.
or the messaging. They could probably help my clients. So I try to stay abreast of sales tech.
Is there a time of day you're more creative? I assume if you're doing comedy shows, sometimes you're probably working more at night rather than early in the morning.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned, I'm not really on stage too much. I might go back to it. I just, it's sort of intrusive mentally. If you want to, it's hard to balance comedy and trying to figure out a whole other life. Let's just
Right.
say. But my comedy brain hasn't been turned off. The creativity is better at night. I will say that.
Got it.
Sometimes in the morning you're struck with something and you just like drop everything you're doing, and there's no particular time, but I will say I'm probably a little bit better at night because I've taken care of my priorities during the day.
Understand. All right, let's get serious as we move to wrapping up. The biggest business problem that really worries you as you look at it over the next 5 years,
You're talking globally?
in whatever context you want to answer.
Listen, I think the biggest problem is already one that we're hopefully aware of, is that people are more and more addicted to their screens. Human communication is less of a priority, but it's more important than ever as a result.
Right.
And I think there's a whole generation, and I hate sounding like the old guy in the room, but there's definitely a whole generation of kids who have grown up on screens and they don't know how to have conversations. And these are the people that are getting hired in sales roles. And if you don't know how to have a real conversation, you don't know how to go network. What does this mean? Like,
Right.
It just means more screen time for everybody.
Right.
Everyone will just bury their heads in the sand. I did an event with Zoho CRM a few years ago where I would deliver my training and workshop, and people were invited to come network and have a drink and some food beforehand. These were all salespeople. We'd encourage them to bring some colleagues so they could work as a group on writing a joke. And everyone in the room could have been a prospect for everybody else except for your colleagues. But I was really disappointed to see that they all just grabbed their food and their drink and sat with their colleagues.
Well,
I was like, guys, like, I'm not saying you're going to get a big deal out of this, but go introduce yourself to some people.
right.
You never know who they are or who they might know in their network that could help you meet someone that can help you get to your number.
Right.
And it's like it doesn't even dawn on them. They were just end of day, free drinks, we'll have some fun.
Well,
So I would say that like just our dependence on devices, and as a result, we crawl into our tribe. Like we recede. What's the right word? We just stick with our tribes.
mhm.
And I think that's what frightens me the most.
All right, let's go positive now. Humor aside, what's the biggest opportunity that you think most companies are missing?
Oh, hard to say. I see more of them leaning into live events again, and not necessarily trade shows, just little dinners. I actually think it's great, to tell you the truth, because for so long, at least in tech, they were so focused on volume, just
Right.
blasting out a gazillion messages. Now they're like, let's pick 40 people who we think are really interesting to us and invite them to a nice intimate dinner. And so I'm not the guy inventing it. I'm not saying people should do it. It's happening slowly, but I think companies are starting, at least in tech, again, like maybe people listening are already doing this, but I think we got to get back to basis with human interaction, humor or not, right? Like,
Yeah, I talked to Kathleen Booth the other day, who's the CRO at Pavilion, and she said they're definitely really investing heavily in events and exactly that kind of event that you're describing, where it's not the huge, multi-million dollar tech extravaganza, but really intimate events where people are face to face and connecting and having genuine conversations.
and I think if you get the right audience there, like I'd rather have 40 good people there than 1,000 bad people there.
Right, right.
So it's sort of, coming back to that whole idea of telling a joke at the trade show booth. If I make you laugh and you start talking about it, all of a sudden I could book you for a meeting because it's a real problem for you. You're laughing probably because it's something you've experienced. Get it on the salesperson's calendar versus having them follow up with 30 dud leads from badge scans. It's the
Right.
same approach at these. Get the right people to these events, have real conversations, have salespeople fill up their time having conversations that could turn into revenue.
All right, so the 960 duds, we don't want them contacting you, but the 40 that really ought to be talking to you, how do they reach you? How do they find you? How do they connect with you? How do they learn more?
LinkedIn's always a good place. They can find me JON, and this is my website as well. So my URL is JON. There's no H. JONSELIG.com. Please, if you want to talk, book a meeting with me. You could also send me an email at john@jonselig.com. Just to be clear, the H in John is silent and invisible. There is no H. And LinkedIn is a great place to connect. So email, website, LinkedIn.
Got it. And I'll drop the link to the website in the show notes as well. So wrap us up, John. 1 minute on the state of B2B sales and marketing and what has to happen next.
I think people just got to get back to basics, more human communication, better thought about what's going to resonate with our prospects, less buzzwords, less blasting. And I think younger sales reps in particular need to get uncomfortable with being in live situations, shaking hands, and making those cold calls too. I think cold email is kind of dead, and not dead, but like it's hard right now. I also think that personal branding is pretty important, and putting out content on LinkedIn that showcases your subject matter expertise
And your
is
personality.
important, and your personality. But of course, only if your prospects are there in the first place. So that's a bit of a I'll leave it to everybody listening to figure out if that's a good strategy for them.
Right. Wow. I'm not sure what I can say to wrap this up besides just thank you, John. What a wonderful conversation. I would say for everyone listening, whether you're doubled over laughing or cringing when you realize how dorky most of your messaging sounds, ping John and please share this podcast episode with your colleagues and with friends. Give us a like, comment on it, share your thoughts, offer a review, especially if you're feeling invigorated by this content. It would help us reach additional people. John, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great talk.